A hidden workforce of civilian contractors carried the weight of America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Between 2003 and 2021, 2,871 contractors died, more than the entire United States Marine Corps across both wars. But when fuel convoys like Reggie Lane's were ambushed, or when 16 of 17 men died in unarmored trucks, their deaths vanished from official counts. How did America outsource its wars and bury the people who made victory possible? At the height of the surge in 2007, there were 41,000 more contractors on the ground than uniformed troops. The official Pentagon admission was blunt. The U.S. military cannot move, fight, or sustain itself without this civilian army. Every base, every convoy, every meal depended on workers whose names never appeared on memorial walls. Contractors made up as much as 62% of the American presence in Afghanistan by 2009. In the final years, the ratio grew to 3 contractors for every soldier. In October 2020, the number stood at 43,800 contractors to just 15,000 military personnel in the entire Central Command region. These were not just armed guards or security teams. Most were logistics workers, cooks, mechanics, and drivers. Those were roles once filled by soldiers, now outsourced to civilians and third-country nationals. Despite the scale, almost none of these deaths entered the public record. Contractor losses never appeared in presidential speeches or nightly news casualty counts. Support staff, truck drivers, kitchen workers, and fuel handlers died at rates rivaling frontline combat units. When their convoys were hit, their deaths were filed away as workplace accidents, not war casualties. The paradox was clear. The American war machine depended on a workforce it refused to acknowledge. The more the military relied on contractors, the more invisible their sacrifices became. The question is not just how many died. It is why their stories disappeared so completely. Reggie Lane signed on with KBR for $88,000 a year, good money for a man with no college degree, and a promise of security for his family back home. That promise ended on a highway outside Baghdad. In 2004, Lane's convoy was ambushed. An explosion tore through his truck, ripping off his left arm, shredding his throat, and spilling his intestines onto the floorboard. Lane survived the blast, but not the aftermath. He spent 5 years in a hospital bed, locked in a vegetative state, before dying in 2009 from the wounds he suffered that day. There was no military funeral, no Purple Heart, no place for his name on any memorial wall. His medical care depended on insurance claims that companies fought to deny, arguing over whether a bomb in Iraq counted as a workplace accident. Lane's story is not unique. On Good Friday, April 9, 2004, a KBR fuel convoy rolled toward Baghdad International Airport. Insurgents struck with rifles and rocket-propelled grenades. 5 contractors were killed, dozens wounded. Survivors waited hours for rescue that never came. When workers demanded safer trucks or more protection, supervisors answered with a line that became legend among contractors. Aisle or window? Chicken or pasta? In other words, take the next flight home if you do not like it. Someone else will fill your seat by morning. Hundreds quit after the ambush. KBR simply hired more replacements and kept the convoys rolling unarmored down the same deadly routes. The danger was not reserved for fuel drivers. In November 2005, a security convoy of 17 men headed north near Het. 16 were killed in a single coordinated attack. The incident never appeared in official casualty reports. Families received only silence, left to wonder how their loved ones disappeared from both the battlefield and the record books. The message was clear. When contractors died, their stories ended in filing cabinets, not in the history of America's wars. A contractor killed by a roadside bomb in Iraq did not become a war statistic. Instead, his death entered a maze of paperwork, routed through a corporate structure built for invisibility. KBR, the military's largest logistics contractor, paid thousands of workers through a Cayman Islands shell company called Service Employees International. On paper, SEI existed as a digital file in an offshore registry, not as an office or a phone number. When a contractor died on the job, the company reported the fatality under SEI's name, not KBR's, and not the Department of Defense. In total, 127 deaths were filed under this foreign subsidiary, each logged as a business loss in a tax haven, not as a casualty of war. The next stop was the United States Department of Labor, not the Pentagon. Families filled out forms meant for industrial accidents, not combat deaths. The box labeled workplace accident was checked, even if the cause was an improvised explosive device on a supply route. This single bureaucratic choice rerouted the entire process. The death did not appear in military records, was not counted in official war tallies, and triggered no flag-draped coffin or public ceremony. It became a labor claim. Insurance companies then took over. Under the Defense Base Act, contractors were supposed to receive compensation for injuries or death overseas, but the fine print gave insurers broad leeway to deny claims, arguing that injuries were pre-existing or deaths were not truly job-related. Every denial saved money for the insurance provider and for the contractor's employer. Many families waited years for a ruling. Some received nothing at all. The claims process itself became a filter, quietly thinning the ranks of those who might ever be recognized or compensated. Meanwhile, Pentagon reports began dropping contractor deaths from their tables. After 2007, official documents stopped listing these casualties altogether. Presidential speeches and news briefings cited only military losses, leaving the workforce that kept the war running out of the national memory. The erasure was not a single act. It was a system built step by step, from offshore payroll to accident form, from denied claim to deleted statistic. Convoy work in Iraq and Afghanistan was a numbers game with deadly odds. By late 2007, the attack rate on contractor convoys had climbed from 5.4% to nearly 15%. On some routes, insurgents planted 20 to 30 improvised explosive devices before sunrise, turning highways into minefields. Trucks rolled out in single file, unarmored and easy targets, driven by men who had signed up for 12-hour shifts and the promise of a paycheck, not a firefight. Some were Americans making $150,000 to $240,000 a year for security roles. Others, often from Nepal, Uganda, or India, earned $60 a week for the same missions. The difference between a $6,000 week and a $60 week was often a passport, not the level of risk. The math of survival was brutal and simple. The more convoys rolled, the more bodies filled the seats, the higher the chance that someone would not come back. 74,000 contractors returned home wounded, limbs lost, brains rattled, nerves shot. Their injuries matched those of frontline troops, but their stories ended in silence. No parade, no folded flag, no name etched in granite. The memorial gap is not an accident. The names of the 2,871 contractors killed in these wars do not appear on the Vietnam Memorial or any official monument. The nation debates troop surges and casualty counts, but the deaths of civilian drivers and cooks vanish into filing cabinets and offshore payrolls. Ask most Americans to name a single contractor who died in Iraq or Afghanistan, and the answer is the same. No one can. The question lingers for everyone who benefited from their labor. If the country cannot remember the people who delivered its fuel, built its bases, or died in its supply lines, what does that say about the wars and the nation that erased them? Today, the Pentagon still relies on tens of thousands of contractors whose deaths vanish from official tallies. As new conflicts unfold, the machinery of erasure endures. Every debate over troop levels hides a deeper question. Whose sacrifice are we willing to see, and whose are we content to forget?